He shoved the boy's head underwater while barking about neighborhood safety, but this wasn't law enforcement, and this wasn't safety. Seconds earlier, it was just a backyard pool party. Now, a mother was screaming, a father lay bleeding, and two fake enforcers were about to learn what happens when you mess with the wrong family. Saturday afternoon. The heat in Columbia, South Carolina, clung to the skin like a wet towel, but in the Thompson backyard, it felt like summer was doing what it was supposed to, bringing joy. The grill hissed with burgers and corn. Kids squealed barefoot across the damp grass, dripping from cannonballs into a large inflatable pool. Lawn chairs formed a half-circle around it, where neighbors chatted lazily with paper cups in hand. Vanessa Thompson, 41, snapped pictures from the patio steps, capturing Elijah mid-jump into the water, his oversized goggles askew and arms flailing. He wasn't a strong swimmer, never had been, but he loved the water. It gave him confidence. It made him feel free. Elijah was 9. All elbows and knobby knees, a bookish kid with an imagination too big for his body. His father, Marcus, stood nearby flipping burgers in a faded Marine Corps t-shirt, a white towel over his shoulder, keeping half an eye on Elijah with the kind of half-alertness parents master over time. It was one of those Saturdays where everything feels still and safe. Until it wasn't. A black SUV screeched to a stop outside the backyard gate. No one recognized it. The engine cut, doors slammed, and out stepped two men in black polos, tactical vests, and mirrored sunglasses. The words Neighborhood Integrity Enforcement were slapped across their chests like an official seal. No one moved at first. Then the taller one, with a shaved head and voice like a bag of gravel, raised his arm and barked, "This property is in violation of Community Code 3.17, unauthorized pool use." Vanessa blinked. "Excuse me?" The man didn't answer. He moved like a battering ram, pulling yellow caution tape from his vest, stepping toward the pool without explanation. His partner, stockier with a crooked jaw and permanent sneer, trailed behind. "Who are you?" Marcus asked, stepping forward. "Neighborhood Compliance Division." "You were notified." Gravel flashed something that resembled a badge, but it passed by too fast to read. "No, we weren't," Marcus said, tension building in his voice. "Our HOA doesn't have a compliance division. We're a third-party enforcer contracted by the homeowners board," the stocky one added, snapping the tape between his hands. "And you're in breach." "My son is in that pool," Marcus said, stepping between the men and the kids. But it was too late. Gravel surged forward, stepping over pool toys and deck chairs like they weren't there. He didn't hesitate. He didn't warn. He plunged his arm into the pool and grabbed Elijah by the back of the neck. "He's resisting," Gravel growled. "Stop squirming, little punk." Elijah flailed, his floaty slipping off. Vanessa screamed. Water splashed. Elijah's head was shoved under. Marcus lunged, but the stocky man tackled him onto the concrete. There was a sickening crack when his head hit the stone. "Stop." "He's just a kid," shouted a neighbor, cell phone filming the entire thing. Elijah was underwater. 20 seconds. 30. Time lost meaning. Vanessa dove in fully clothed, her heels still on, clawing at the water, her hands closing around her son's limp body. She pulled him up, sputtering, screaming, begging for breath. "Come on, baby. Come on," she shouted. Marcus crawled toward them, blood dripping down his temple. Neighbors gathered at the fence, horrified. Phones were out. Recording. Calling 911. Shouting. Crying. Elijah's lips were blue. His chest was still. Then, a cough. A sputter. A gush of chlorinated water spewed from his mouth. And then a wail. Loud and jagged. Vanessa collapsed, clutching him. He was alive. But barely. Gravel stepped back, eyes scanning for escape. The SUV engine roared. But the gate, now blocked by three neighbors with arms crossed and fury in their eyes, wasn't going to open. "You're not going anywhere," said an older man holding a rake like a weapon. Police sirens howled in the distance. The fake officers froze. Gravel tried to push through but was tackled by a teenager with a lacrosse stick. The other man didn't even get that far. When the cops arrived, neighbors flooded them with footage. "They almost killed him," Marcus shouted, pointing to Elijah, who clung to Vanessa's soaked blouse, still sobbing. "They aren't law enforcement. They don't work for anyone." The officers listened. Watched. Nodded grimly. The two men were cuffed on the spot. Not officers. No authorization. No paperwork. Just con artists in tactical vests who thought they could play God in a quiet neighborhood. That night, the Thompson house was silent. The pool had been drained. Elijah lay upstairs, trembling in his bed, the stuffed blue shark he always slept with clutched tightly in his arms. Marcus sat at the kitchen table, an ice pack pressed to his head, eyes empty. But Vanessa was not still. She stood in the hallway, hair still wet, face pale but burning. She stared at her laptop screen. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from fury. Tabs opened one after another. Legal databases. Court filings. HOA bylaws. She hadn't touched any of this in years. Not since Elijah was born. She'd left behind the courtroom, the deposition rooms, the cross-examinations. Left it all for story time and science projects. But tonight, something came back alive. She moved to the kitchen, grabbed her old law school binder from the bottom drawer, wiped the dust off the cover, and flipped it open. She knew what they'd say. That it was a misunderstanding. That the men didn't mean to hurt anyone. That no one died. But that wasn't enough. Elijah's neck bore bruises. His spirit bore scars. And the next time, someone else's child might not make it. She wouldn't wait for the system to care. She would force it to. Downstairs, Marcus finally spoke, his voice hoarse. "You okay?" Vanessa didn't answer immediately. She looked down at the documents on the table, printouts, screenshots, blurry badge photos. Then she turned to him, her voice cold steel. "I'm going to bury them," she said. "Every one of them who thought they could do this to our son." Marcus just nodded. He didn't ask what she meant. He didn't have to. Because he saw it in her eyes, something that looked a lot like war. Outside, the neighborhood was quiet again. The cops had left. The tape was gone. But something had shifted. The air felt different. Tense. Alert. A current moved through the street, invisible but undeniable. Neighbors who once waved politely from porches were now texting each other. Sharing footage. Organizing. No one called it justice yet. But everyone felt it. Back upstairs, Elijah finally fell asleep. His chest rose and fell, slow and shallow. But his dreams were different now. No longer filled with superhero flights or underwater kingdoms. Now there were men with mirrored sunglasses and rough hands, shouting things he didn't understand. Vanessa watched him for a long time before stepping back downstairs. She poured a cup of coffee she didn't need, opened a fresh legal pad, and began writing names. Gravel. The stocky one. Their badge manufacturer. Whoever hired them. Whoever approved them. Whoever looked the other way. This wasn't just a pool incident. It was an attack. An organized one. And someone gave the green light. Vanessa intended to find out who. And when she did, she'd make sure they wished they'd never heard the name Elijah Thompson. She wasn't looking for an apology. She wasn't asking for peace. She was building a case. Not just against two men, but against the system that let it happen. And in the morning, she would begin. The sun rose on Hawthorne Street, but the light didn't reach the inside of the Thompson home. Not really. Not yet. Upstairs, Elijah lay curled in bed, his stuffed shark clutched so tight it left marks on his arms. Marcus sat at the kitchen table, the same place he'd spent the night, eyes red and knuckles scraped. But Vanessa? She hadn't slept. She didn't even try. While the rest of the house grappled with what had happened, the image of their son held underwater by a stranger who claimed to be protecting the community, Vanessa had stayed up drafting. Her laptop was surrounded by open legal pads, highlighters bled dry, printouts of HOA bylaws and local enforcement codes spread like battlefield maps. She hadn't worn a blazer in years, but by sunrise she was dressed like she never left the courtroom. Because this time, she wasn't just a mother grieving. She was preparing for war. By 8 a.m., Vanessa was in the county courthouse without an appointment, standing in front of Assistant District Attorney Lena Marsh's cluttered desk. "I want charges filed, felony charges. Attempted murder, child endangerment, impersonation of a law enforcement officer, and assault with a deadly weapon. And I want them today." Lena, caught off guard, looked up from her coffee. "Mrs. Thompson, I understand this is traumatic, do you?" Vanessa interrupted. "My 9-year-old nearly drowned because 2 unlicensed thugs in tactical gear shoved him underwater during a backyard birthday party while pretending to be enforcers of law that doesn't exist. They tackled my husband. They fled the scene. And we have 6 different camera angles. I'm not here to vent. I'm here to prosecute." Lena opened her mouth, then closed it. Vanessa's presence didn't allow space for excuses. By noon, the story had already hit a local podcast. A former client of Vanessa's from her law days hosted it. The title? "When HOA Turns Hostile, the Elijah Thompson Case." Within hours, the hashtag imposter enforcers began trending across Columbia. By nightfall, it was in Atlanta and Charlotte. The next morning, it was everywhere. Neighborhood groups shared the footage. Parents reposted Vanessa's breakdown of what HOA authority is and isn't. And when Lena Marsh finally announced the upgraded charges, attempted murder, aggravated assault, and impersonation of a public official, the public roared. The attackers, real names sealed for federal safety reasons, were denied bail. The judge's tone was as cold as Vanessa's had been. "You don't get to wear authority and invent law," he said. "This isn't a costume party. This is civil society." But Vanessa wasn't satisfied with charges alone. She wanted the rot. And it didn't take long to find it. Late one night, surrounded by coffee cups and scanned PDF documents, she traced a payment authorization form with a signature she didn't recognize. It led to Franklin Devlin, president of the Hawthorne Heights HOA. A man who once knocked on their door to ask them to trim the vines on their fence a little more symmetrically. A retired insurance adjuster with a gold retirement watch and a God complex. Franklin had signed off on a third-party compliance pilot program, hiring off-duty security contractors through a shell company. There were no background checks. No state certifications. Just handshakes and envelopes. Vanessa filed a motion to subpoena HOA records. What she found made her stomach turn. 4 other families had been harassed by the same pair of enforcers. One woman's elderly mother had been screened at for keeping a bird feeder. A teenage boy had been followed home and told his basketball hoop violated the neighborhood sightline policy. One couple had their garden bed ripped out during the night. And no one had questioned it, because the men wore vests and spoke with authority. No one, until Elijah. At the preliminary hearing against Franklin Devlin, Vanessa brought documents, testimonies, and even an HOA board member to the stand. Franklin claimed he never meant for anyone to be harmed, but his signature was on every payment order. "You didn't just look away," Vanessa said before the judge. "You wrote the check. You made it possible. And when those men held my son's head underwater, it was your ink that funded it." Franklin was indicted for negligent supervision and complicity in unauthorized enforcement activity. His mugshot appeared next to the attackers on local news. That same week, Vanessa petitioned the state legislature with the help of a local representative. The bill? The Neighborhood Enforcement Accountability Act, prohibiting HOAs from contracting enforcement agencies without background checks, state registration, and third-party oversight. Within 3 weeks, it passed unanimously. It wasn't just about her street anymore. It was about every family who had ever been told they couldn't paint their door red or plant tomatoes in a raised bed without getting a fine. It was about power pretending to be law. Marcus, meanwhile, focused on healing. He walked Elijah to therapy twice a week, never more than 2 steps away. At night, he checked the doors 3 times. He wasn't a man who cried. But some mornings, Vanessa would find him sitting at the edge of Elijah's bed, watching their son sleep, a silent sentry in the dark. Elijah began drawing again, pictures of sharks and spaceships and sometimes people in black vests with big red XS drawn over them. He spoke less. But his therapist said his progress was strong. One day, out of nowhere, Elijah looked up from a sketch and said, "I didn't scream underwater. I just waited." Vanessa nodded, her heart cracking a little more. "That's okay, baby. You didn't need to scream. I heard you anyway." 3 weeks after the attack, a vigil was held in the Thompsons' backyard, not a sad one, but a statement. Neighbors lit candles and lined the fence with paper signs, "We stand with Elijah, no more fake power, this street fights back." A city council member came. A local TV anchor covered it. Vanessa spoke for the first time in front of a crowd. She didn't talk about rage or lawsuits. She talked about safety. About how it should never depend on uniforms or acronyms, but on people doing the right thing. Her voice was calm, controlled, terrifyingly precise. And when she finished, people stood in silence. Not because they were unsure what to say, but because they knew they were looking at someone who had decided the rules would never be the same again. That night, back inside, Marcus brought her tea. She looked exhausted. Her blouse was untucked. Her eyes rimmed red. But her fingers kept moving over the laptop keys. "You can stop now," Marcus said gently. "You already won." Vanessa shook her head. "I haven't even started." She pointed to a spreadsheet, names, phone numbers, HOA boards across the state. This wasn't just Franklin. This wasn't just here. If it happened to us, it's happening to others. They just haven't had their Elijah moment yet. She scrolled to the next name. Another HOA. Another board president. Another contract. "We're not just cleaning up our block," she said. "We're taking back the whole map." And in that moment, Marcus saw it. Not the woman he married. Not even the woman who saved their son. But something rarer. A mother with a mission and a binder full of proof. And for the first time in weeks, he smiled, not because the war was over, but because the world had no idea what was coming next. Her name was Vanessa Thompson. And the world was about to remember it. It began with a piece of mail that wasn't theirs. A beige envelope slipped behind a box of sprinkler parts in the garage, something Marcus had been meaning to return since last summer. He found it while reorganizing, a mindless distraction from the noise outside, from the interviews, the neighborhood meetings, and the nonprofit applications Vanessa had been juggling since the verdict. It was addressed to someone on the HOA board, the treasurer, Beatrice Lund. It looked innocuous, just an invoice, folded twice and taped closed. But when Vanessa opened it, her blood ran cold. A payment. Not to a landscaping crew or signage company or any legitimate vendor. It was a wire transfer from the HOA's fund to a Delaware-based LLC called Urban Oversight Solutions. No description. No service listed. Just 5 figures routed to a company that had no employees, no office, no presence outside a P.O. box. Vanessa recognized the name immediately. It had shown up in the subpoenaed documents tied to Franklin Devlin. Twice. Contracts labeled Enforcement Risk Mitigation bore the same LLC as the payee. Vanessa had assumed it was a shell company, now she had proof. But what chilled her was the date. The transfer had been made just 6 days before Elijah's assault. And the signature at the bottom? Beatrice Lund. She didn't waste time. Within 48 hours, Vanessa filed a new motion. This wasn't just negligence or complicity anymore. This was fraud. Coordinated. Funded. Systemic. What started with two fake enforcers had now expanded into something else entirely, a racketeering network disguised as suburban governance. Her argument was simple: when people conspire to use fear, intimidation, and violence under a fake authority to enforce rules that benefit them financially or politically, that's not bad management. That's organized crime. And the law had a name for it: RICO. The Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. Vanessa's RICO case exploded like wildfire across the state. The documents she uncovered, some through FOIA, others from a whistleblower HOA member who couldn't sleep at night, showed that 12 different HOAs across South Carolina had funneled money through urban oversight solutions. In each case, enforcers had been contracted off the books to maintain visual consistency and community compliance. In truth, they were vigilantes. Freelancers paid in cash, accountable to no one. They ripped up gardens, smashed basketball hoops, screamed at children, and threatened elderly residents. And nobody stopped them because they wore vests, carried clipboards, and cited rules no one ever checked. Until now. Vanessa filed in federal court. Beatrice Lund, once the smiling face behind bake sales and holiday light contests, was now seated at the defense table, pearls clutched like prayer beads. Her lawyer tried to paint her as a harmless retiree who didn't understand the paperwork. Vanessa shut that down with 3 clicks of a projector remote. First slide, a photo of Beatrice drinking red wine at a community leadership conference, posing arm in arm with Gravel, the same man who nearly drowned Elijah. Second slide, an internal email where Beatrice wrote, "We should consider the escalation team for the Thompsons." The husband's a soft touch. Third slide, a close-up of Elijah's ER intake report, time-stamped, showing bruises on his neck from where Gravel had held him underwater. The courtroom went dead silent. Judge Miriam Keene, a formidable federal judge with a reputation for not tolerating nonsense, leaned forward. "Mrs. Lund," she said slowly, "when you empower violence with bureaucracy and call it community management, don't be surprised when the community fights back." It became the quote of the year. The verdict didn't take long. Beatrice Lund was found guilty on 6 counts: racketeering, conspiracy to commit fraud, aiding impersonation of law enforcement, negligent endangerment of a child, misuse of public funds, and obstruction of justice. She was sentenced to 11 years in federal prison and ordered to pay $7 million in civil damages, which would be distributed among victims from all 12 HOA neighborhoods. Urban Oversight Solutions was dismantled by court order. Several HOA boards voluntarily dissolved rather than face audit. The others were stripped of enforcement authority pending full investigations. Across the state, and eventually the country, HOA reform bills began circulating. Some passed. Others stalled. But the message was clear: the age of unchecked neighborhood tyranny was over. Vanessa didn't stop. She launched the Safe Block Project, a nonprofit that now helps residents challenge illegal enforcement actions by their HOAs. It started with 1 case. By spring, it was working on 32. She traveled. She spoke before state legislatures. She gave testimony to a Senate subcommittee. Her article, "The Quiet Empire: How Power Hides Behind Fences," went viral. News anchors called her the Erin Brockovich of the suburbs. She just called herself a mother. Back at home, Elijah was healing. He'd just turned 10 and gave a speech at his elementary school's civics assembly. He talked about his case. About the law. About standing up, even when your voice shakes. The auditorium went silent when he held up a photo of the badge Gravel wore and said, "This isn't real." But the fear I felt was. His teacher cried. The principal asked for a copy of the speech to frame. Marcus found his own way to give back. He started building wheelchair ramps for elderly veterans in the county. Quiet work. Measured. Every hammer strike, every screw, a reminder that protection doesn't always come in the form of confrontation. Sometimes it's just making the world a little easier to move through. And then came the 1-year mark. A barbecue. Not to forget, but to reclaim. The pool had been cleaned. The yard was filled with neighbors, old, new, even a few from other towns who had followed the story and just wanted to shake Vanessa's hand. Someone brought a karaoke machine. Someone else brought cupcakes shaped like gavels. Kids played. Dogs ran. And then Elijah, now taller, stood on the back deck with a handmade sign. It read in bold marker, "This is our block. It belongs to the people." Applause erupted. Cameras flashed. That clip went viral too. But not for the rage. Not for the politics. It went viral because people wanted to believe that justice still worked, that ordinary families could still win, that courage, especially when it wears the face of a child, could still change something. Someone nailed a new sign to the community bulletin board later that night. It read, "No fake power. Real rights only." And that's how it ended, not with a press conference or courtroom monologue, but with a quiet family, on a quiet block, finally exhaling. And how it really began. What happened to the Thompson family wasn't just a fluke or an anomaly, it was a mirror held up to something deeper that's been quietly growing in too many American neighborhoods: the unchecked abuse of authority hidden behind the illusion of order. The fake uniforms. The borrowed language of law. The silent compliance from those too unsure to question it. And most dangerously, the assumption that people will stay quiet when wronged. But Vanessa Thompson didn't stay quiet. She stood up not only as a mother but as a citizen, reminding us that the most powerful legal tool we possess isn't just a law degree, or a courtroom, or even media attention. It's conviction. It's the refusal to accept this is just how it works when how it works endangers our children, silences our neighbors, or strips away our rights with a clipboard and a smirk. This story teaches us that courage doesn't always come with a title or a badge. Sometimes it comes in the form of a mother who hasn't been in a courtroom in a decade, or a child who speaks truth in a school assembly. Sometimes it's a neighbor blocking a gate with their own body because they know what's right. Sometimes it's you, writing the first email, asking the first question, refusing the first fine. To every listener and viewer who followed this journey, thank you. Thank you for caring about justice, about truth, and about the families like the Thompsons who fight battles we don't always see until they hit the headlines. Your support gives these stories their power. You give voice to the people who might otherwise be forgotten in the footnotes of HOA meeting minutes or buried in bureaucracy. Here on U.S. Justice Story, we share these stories not just to inform you, but to empower you. Because injustice hides best in silence, and you, yes, you, have the power to shine a light. Ask questions. Demand transparency. Protect your community. And above all, never let fear wear a uniform unchallenged. Until the next story, take care of each other. Stay informed. Stay vigilant. And never forget, you have more power than they want you to believe.